teenage mother disregarded by doctor, but her delivery saves another life. The frigid March dawn shrouded the city in silence as Amanda, just 17, awoke feeling her first contractions. Her frail body trembled, not only from the cold seeping through the cracks in the window of the small room she shared with her younger sister, but mainly from the fear gnawing at her insides. 9 months ago, her life had changed completely. The positive pregnancy test brought no joy, only tears, and the overwhelming feeling of being completely alone in the world. Her parents, strict and religious people, had uttered harsh words when they found out, "You have shamed this family." Since then, Amanda had lived a routine of judgmental stares, whispers in the school hallways, and the crushing weight of carrying a life within her while still considered a child by society. That morning, as she clutched her belly and felt the waves of pain intensify, Amanda knew she needed to go to the hospital. But the terror of facing more judgment, more contemptuous glances, almost paralyzed her. She woke her mother with a trembling voice, and all she received was a resigned sigh before they both left for the nearest emergency room. The municipal hospital was bustling even at that early hour. Fluorescent lights flickered on the ceiling, creating a cold and impersonal atmosphere. Amanda was led by a tired nurse to triage, where she waited for almost an hour, feeling the contractions increase in intensity and frequency. When her name was finally called, she entered a room where Dr. Mariana Silveira, an experienced obstetrician of 45 years, awaited her with an expression Amanda immediately recognized: disapproval. The doctor barely glanced at the teenager's face as she read her chart. 17 years old, first pregnancy, without adequate prenatal care, she murmured in a tone that dripped with judgment. Amanda felt her cheeks burn with shame. Girls your age should be studying, thinking about the future, not bringing another mouth into the world without being able to feed it, said Dr. Mariana, without lifting her eyes from the chart. The words cut deeper than any contraction. Amanda swallowed her tears, biting her lower lip so hard she tasted blood. The doctor performed the examination in a mechanical, almost robotic way, as if Amanda were nothing more than another number in the statistics. As she was led to the pre-delivery room, Amanda couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Mariana's harsh words. Every syllable reverberated in her mind, amplifying the guilt and shame she already carried. She had never planned to get pregnant. I had dreams. I wanted to finish high school, maybe go to nursing school. But one single night, one impulsive choice with her boyfriend, who then disappeared as soon as he found out about the pregnancy, had changed everything. Now, lying on an uncomfortable stretcher, listening to the moans of other women in labor, Amanda felt completely lost. The room was freezing, and she had no one by her side. Her mother had stayed in the reception area, unable to offer the emotional support Amanda so desperately needed. The hours dragged on, and the pain became unbearable. Each contraction was a wave that drowned her a little more. Amanda gripped the sheets so tightly that her fingers turned white. At some point, Between contractions, she heard raised voices outside the room. There was an urgency in the tone. Something was happening at the hospital, but amidst her own grief, Amanda could barely process what she was hearing. Across the corridor, a desperate situation unfolded. Laura Mendez, 32, a successful businesswoman and mother of a 5-year-old boy, had entered the hospital presenting serious complications in her second pregnancy. She was in her 38th week when she began to bleed profusely. The diagnosis was immediate and terrifying: placental abruption. Laura needed an emergency cesarean section, but her blood type, AB negative, was extremely rare. The hospital's blood bank was critically short of this specific type. The doctors were racing against time. Every passing minute increased the risk of Laura and her baby not surviving. Dr. Mariana, who was also Laura's obstetrician, was visibly distraught. Unlike the treatment she had given Amanda, she treated Laura with utmost kindness and concern, running from one place to another, making desperate calls to other hospitals, trying to locate blood bags. The medical team was in a state of controlled panic. Laura was semi-conscious, losing blood rapidly. Her husband, Roberto, paced back and forth in the waiting room, his hands trembling, his face pale, silently praying that his wife and son would survive the night. It was then that a young nurse named Beatrice had an idea that could change everything. She had just drawn blood from Amanda for routine postpartum tests, and upon checking the results, her eyes widened. Amanda had blood type AB negative, the same rarity that could save Laura. Beatrice rushed to Dr. Mariana with the information. The doctor hesitated for a brief moment. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. The teenager she had judged and treated with contempt could be the only chance of salvation for her preferred patient. But there was no time to weigh moral contradictions. Lives were at stake. Dr. Mariana practically ran to the room where Amanda was suffering from contractions. Upon entering, the doctor had to swallow her pride and approach the stretcher. For the first time that night, she looked directly into the teenager's eyes. "Amanda," she said in a voice that tried to disguise her desperation, "I need to ask you something very important. There is another patient here who urgently needs blood of your type. Would you be willing to donate?" Amanda, amidst the pain and confusion, could barely comprehend what was being asked. But something about that request resonated deeply in her wounded heart. Amanda blinked several times, trying to focus on Dr. Mariana's face through the fog of pain that clouded her vision. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, but seemed to come from far away, as if she were submerged underwater. "Donate blood?" she repeated weakly, almost a whisper. Dr. Mariana nodded, and for the first time since they had met, there was something different in her expression. Vulnerability. "Yes, Amanda. There's a pregnant woman here who is losing a lot of blood. She has the same blood type as you, AB negative, which is extremely rare. Without an immediate transfusion, she and the baby won't survive. You're the only person in the hospital right now who can help her." Amanda felt another contraction sweep through her body, making her clench her teeth and squeeze her eyes shut. When the wave of pain passed, she looked at the doctor who hours before had humiliated and judged her mercilessly. Part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to let Dr. Mariana taste the powerlessness and despair. But Amanda wasn't like that. Despite all the physical and emotional pain she carried, she still had compassion. "If I can help save a life," she said in a trembling voice, "then do what you need to do. But will my baby be okay?" The question came laden with genuine fear. Amanda didn't know much about blood donation, especially during labor. Dr. Mariana placed her hand on the teenager's shoulder, a gesture that surprised them both. "We'll only collect what's necessary and monitor you and your baby the whole time. You're very brave, Amanda." The medical team was urgently mobilized. While Amanda continued in labor, a nurse specializing in blood collection entered the room with all the necessary equipment. Beatrice, the young nurse who had identified the blood compatibility, stood beside Amanda, holding her free hand as the needle was inserted into her arm. "You're doing something incredible," Beatrice whispered, her eyes shining with genuine admiration. Amanda could barely process what was happening. There she was, a 17-year-old girl, despised by society, judged for her choices, and now becoming the only hope of salvation for a complete stranger. The irony of the situation was so profound, it would almost be comical if it weren't so dramatic. As her blood flowed into the collection bag, Amanda closed her eyes and thought about the baby about to be born. She thought about what that child's life would be like, what kind of mother she would be. She also thought about the unknown woman fighting for her life somewhere in that same hospital. Did she also have children? Did someone love her? Was she waiting for her at home? A new contraction, more intense than the previous ones, made Amanda groan in pain. The nurse collecting the blood worked quickly, aware that labor was progressing. In a few minutes, 2 precious bags of AB-negative blood were ready. "We did it," said the nurse with a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Amanda. You just saved 2 lives." The blood bags were immediately taken to the operating room where Laura Mendez awaited an emergency cesarean section. Dr. Mariana ran alongside the nurse, their footsteps echoing down the hospital's white corridor. When they arrived at the operating room, the situation was critical. Laura had lost consciousness, and her vital signs were dangerously low. The anesthesiologist was already prepared, the surgical team in position. "We have the blood," announced Dr. Sa. Mariana, and it was as if oxygen returned to that room. The transfusion began immediately while the cesarean section was initiated. Every second counted. Dr. Mariana's experienced hands worked with millimeter precision, opening layers of tissue, reaching the uterus, locating the baby. Amanda's blood flowed into Laura's veins, restoring color to her pale face, stabilizing her blood pressure, giving her a chance to fight. Meanwhile, back in the pre-delivery room, Amanda felt that the moment of birth was near. The contractions were now coming at intervals of only 2 minutes. Her body was sweating, trembling, begging for relief. Beatrice didn't leave her side, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth, whispering words of encouragement. You are strong, Amanda. Stronger than you imagine. Your baby is almost here. Amanda squeezed the nurse's hand tightly, grateful not to be completely alone at that moment. The loneliness that had marked her entire pregnancy seemed, at least there, a little less oppressive. In the operating room, a cry echoed through the room. Laura's baby had been born. A healthy boy with strong lungs who announced his arrival into the world with vigor. The medical team let out collective sighs of relief, but Laura was not yet out of danger. The transfusion continued, and Dr. Mariana worked to control the bleeding and suture the layers of her abdomen. Minutes that seemed like hours passed until finally Laura's vital signs stabilized completely. She was saved. Mother and son would survive. Outside, Roberto was informed of the news by a resident doctor. The man fell to his knees right there in the corridor, tears of gratitude streaming down his face. He could hardly believe that the nightmare was over, that his wife and second child were alive. When he asked what had saved Laura, the resident explained about the blood donation from another patient. Roberto wanted to know who it was, wanted to thank her personally, but was informed that, for the time being, the donor was in labor and could not receive visitors. Meanwhile, Dr. Mariana, still in her blood-stained surgical gown, left the operating room and leaned against the hallway wall. Her legs trembled. She had experienced many emergency situations throughout her career, but that night was different. Something inside her had changed, and she knew exactly what it was. Shame. Deep shame for the way she had treated Amanda. The doctor closed her eyes and allowed herself to mentally relive every harsh word she had said to the teenager, every look of contempt, every hasty judgment. Mariana Silveira had become a doctor to save lives, to bring hope where there was despair, to be the hand that comforts when the world rejects. But at some point over the years she had forgotten that. She had become cynical, judgmental, allowing her own prejudices and frustrations to shape how she treated her patients. And now the teenager she had humiliated was the very one who had saved her dearest patient. The irony was a painful but necessary lesson. Mariana took a deep breath, wiped her face with her hands, and decided she needed to do something. She needed to apologize. She needed to acknowledge her mistake. But before she could move, a nurse appeared running down the hall. "Dr. Mariana, Amanda is 10 centimeters dilated. The baby is coming." The doctor didn't hesitate. She ran back to the pre-delivery room, quickly changing her gown and gloves. When she entered the room, she found Amanda in the midst of pushing, her face red, her muscles tense, her whole small body working to bring new life into the world. And for the first time, Dr. Mariana didn't see an irresponsible teenager. She saw a courageous, generous young woman who, even amidst her own pain, had chosen to help another person. "Amanda, you're doing great," said Dr. Mariana, positioning herself to assist with the delivery. Her voice was now completely different, filled with genuine warmth and respect. On the next contraction, I want you to push as if you were trying to have a bowel movement, with all the strength you have. Amanda followed the instructions, grunting with the effort, feeling her body open in ways she never imagined possible. The pain was transcendent, beyond description, but along with it came something else: determination. She was about to meet her son. After 9 months carrying that life, facing judgment, loneliness, and fear, she would finally look into the eyes of the person who had completely transformed her existence. "I see the head," announced Dr. Mariana with genuine enthusiasm. "One more push, Amanda. You can do it." Beatrice held one of Amanda's hands, while another nurse held the other. Both encouraged her, forming a chain of support that the teenager had never experienced before. On the next contraction, Amanda gathered all her remaining strength and pushed with everything she had. And then, in a moment that seemed to suspend time, a sharp, vigorous cry filled the room. Her baby had been born. Dr. Mariana held the tiny creature covered in varnish and blood, and when her eyes met Amanda's, tears streamed down her face. "It's a girl," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy girl." The baby was immediately placed on Amanda's chest, skin to skin, and in that moment, the whole world disappeared. There was no more pain, no more fear, no more judgment or shame. There was only that tiny creature, with narrowed eyes and clenched fists, instinctively seeking the comfort of the heartbeat it had heard for 9 months. Amanda began to cry, deep sobs that shook her exhausted body. They were tears of relief, of instant and overwhelming love, of gratitude for having made it this far. "Hello, my little one," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying so much. "I am your mother, and I love you so much." While the medical team performed the postpartum procedures, cutting the umbilical cord, cleaning and examining the baby, Dr. Mariana couldn't take her eyes off Amanda. The scene before her was a masterpiece of maternal love in its purest form, and she had almost missed it because of her own prejudices. When the procedures were finally completed and Amanda was stabilized, with her clean daughter wrapped in blankets resting in her arms, Dr. Mariana approached the stretcher. "Amanda," she began, her voice heavy with emotion she tried to contain, "I need to talk to you. I need to apologize." The teenager looked up, still intoxicated by the moment of meeting her daughter, and met the doctor's gaze. "I treated you horribly when you arrived here, Doctor." Mariana continued, her words coming out hurriedly, as if she were afraid of losing her courage if she stopped. "I judged you without knowing your story, without offering the compassion and respect you deserved. I was exactly the kind of professional I swore I would never become. And I have no excuse for it." Amanda remained silent for a moment, just looking at the doctor, processing the words. Part of her wanted to throw those apologies back in Dr. Mariana's face, wanted to make her feel the same humiliation she had felt. But when she looked at her daughter in her arms, when she felt the warm, soft weight of that new life against her chest, Amanda realized she no longer carried anger. "I accept your apologies," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. It wasn't easy to hear those things you said. I already feel judged all the time by everyone. But I made a decision today. I decided I'm going to be the best mother I can be. No matter what people think of me, Dr. Mariana nodded, discreetly wiping away a tear that had escaped. You're already a wonderful mother, Amanda. What you did today, donating blood while you were in labor, that was extraordinary. You saved 2 lives. The woman who received your blood and her baby are alive because of you. Amanda blinked, surprised. In the intensity of her own labor, she had almost forgotten about the donation. Are they okay? She asked. They're doing great, Doctor. Mariana replied with a genuine smile. Mother and baby, a healthy boy, and all thanks to you. Amanda felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had helped save lives. She, the despised teenager, the girl everyone thought was a walking mistake, had made a real difference in the world. There was something profoundly transformative about this realization. Beatrice, who had stayed close throughout the conversation, approached with a smile. There's someone who would very much like to meet you if you're willing. The husband of the woman you helped save is asking to see you. He wants to thank you personally. Amanda looked at her daughter, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms, and then at Beatrice. Of course, she said softly. He can come. Minutes later, Roberto entered the room, and the sight he met made him stop in his tracks. There was a teenage girl who looked like a child herself, exhausted, her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, but holding a newborn baby with such tenderness and love that it was impossible not to be moved. Are you Amanda? He asked in a trembling voice. She nodded. Roberto walked to the stretcher and, to everyone's surprise, knelt beside her. I have no words to thank you for what you did for my family, he said, his voice breaking. My wife Laura and our son are alive because of you. You are an angel. Amanda didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her an angel before. On the contrary, she had been called irresponsible, careless, a burden on society. But here was a grown man, kneeling beside her, tears of gratitude streaming down his face, treating her like a heroine. I only did what anyone would do, Amanda murmured, feeling her own cheeks well up. No, Roberto said firmly, standing up and wiping his face. Not everyone would do what you did. Especially in the circumstances you were in. You were in labor, in pain, vulnerable, and yet you chose to help a stranger. That's courage, that's compassion, that's extraordinary. He looked at the baby in Amanda's arms. Your daughter has an incredible mother. She's lucky. Those words pierced Amanda's defenses in a way nothing else had. She began to cry openly, no longer silent sobs, but deep, liberating cries. All the weeks of tension, fear, shame, and loneliness finally found an outlet. And along with the tears, something else flowed. Acceptance. Acceptance that she was, yes, young. Yes, she had made mistakes. But that didn't define her completely. She was also courageous, generous, capable of profound love. She was human with all the complexities that implied. Roberto remained in the room for a few more minutes, sharing stories about his wife Laura and his eldest son, creating a bridge of humanity between two families who would never have met if it weren't for that extraordinary night. After Roberto left, promising to stay in touch and offering any help Amanda might need in the future, the room fell into a comfortable silence. Dr. Mariana returned to do a final check before transferring Amanda to the recovery room. As she examined the young mother, she allowed herself to reflect on the lessons of that night. How many times had she judged people without knowing their stories? How many times had she allowed her own frustrations and prejudices to color the way she treated her patients? Medicine, she reminded herself, wasn't just about technical procedures and scientific knowledge. It was about humanity, about seeing beyond the symptoms and seeing the whole person. Amanda had given her an invaluable gift that night, the chance to become a better doctor, a better person. "Do you have someone to help you at home?" Dr. Mariana asked as she finished the examination. Amanda hesitated before answering. "My mother, I think, but she isn't very happy with all this." The doctor nodded, understanding between the lines what wasn't being said. "You know, there are support groups for young mothers here at the hospital. We also have social workers who can help with resources, childcare, and access to educational programs. You don't have to do this alone." Amanda looked at the doctor in surprise. "Really?" "Very seriously," replied Dr. Mariana, gently touching the teenager's shoulder. "And I will personally make sure you have access to all of that." In the following hours, while Amanda rested in the recovery room with her daughter, now registered as Sophia, news of what had happened began to spread through the hospital. Nurses, residents, and other doctors came to the room to meet the young mother who had donated blood during her own labor. Each visit brought words of admiration and encouragement. For Amanda, who had spent the last 9 months being the target of judgment and disapproving looks, this sudden wave of approval and respect was almost surreal. Beatrice returned during her break, bringing a sandwich and juice. "I thought you might be hungry," she said with a warm smile. "Bringing a life into the world is hard work." Amanda gratefully accepted the food, realizing that she was indeed hungry. While she ate, Beatrice sat down beside her. "You know, Amanda, I was a young mother too. I was 19 when my daughter was born, and it was hard, I won't lie. People judge, make assumptions, treat you like you're inferior. But look where I am today. I'm a nurse, I have a career, my daughter is 12 years old now, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me." Amanda looked at Beatrice with wide eyes. "You? But you seem to have everything so under control." Beatrice laughed softly. "Life isn't about having everything under control, darling. It's about doing the best you can with what you have. And you, Amanda, you've already proven that you have a huge heart and a strength that most people will never have." Amanda's mother finally appeared in the room a few hours later, carrying a small suitcase with clean clothes and some toiletries. She stopped in the doorway, looking at her daughter, who was holding her newborn granddaughter. For a long moment, the two women just stared at each other, a lifetime of unspoken communication passing between them. Then, surprisingly, Amanda's mother began to cry. She approached the bed and, for the first time in months, touched her daughter tenderly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for not being the mother you needed through all of this. I was scared, Amanda. Scared of what people would say, scared of the future, scared that you were throwing your life away." But looking at you now, looking at my granddaughter, her voice faltered. "You are stronger than I ever was." Amanda felt her chest tighten. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words, how much she needed her mother's approval and support. "Mom," she said, her own voice choked with emotion, "I need you. I don't know how to do this alone." "You won't do it alone," the mother replied, wiping her eyes. "I'll be here. We'll figure it out together." The two women then embraced, with little Sophia between them, 3 generations united in a moment of healing and reconciliation. Outside the room, Dr. Mariana watched the scene through the window, a gentle smile on her face. 2 days later, when Amanda was discharged from the hospital, she was no longer the same person who had entered that cold March morning. She was still young, still facing immense challenges, still judged by many. But now she knew something fundamental. She had value. She had made a difference in the world. She had saved lives, and she had people who believed in her. Dr. Mariana insisted on being the doctor to discharge Amanda, and when she handed over the paperwork and postpartum care instructions, she also gave her something more, a card with her personal number. "If you need anything, any questions about Sophia or your own recovery, don't hesitate to call me. Anytime." Amanda took the card, surprised and touched. "Thank you, doctor, for everything. Doctor." Mariana nodded. "No, Amanda, thank you. You reminded me why I became a doctor. You reminded me that each patient is a person with a story, with dignity, with inherent value. I will not forget this lesson." As Amanda was being wheelchair-wrapped toward the hospital exit, Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her arms and her mother beside her carrying the bags, she looked back one last time. The hospital, which had been the scene of so much pain and transformation, was now behind her. But the changes that had occurred within those walls, both in her and in Dr. Mariana, those would be permanent. Amanda took a deep breath of the fresh morning air and smiled at her daughter. "Welcome to the world, Sophia. Let's make this work." Weeks passed, turning into months. Amanda returned to school, determined to finish high school. It wasn't easy. She had to wake up before dawn to breastfeed Sophia, get ready for classes, and rely on the baby's grandmother to take care of the little one during the day. The nights were short, the exhaustion was constant, but Amanda persevered. She had promised herself and her daughter that she would be more than the expectations others had of her. The support group for young mothers that Dr. Mariana had recommended became her lifeline. There, she met other girls in similar situations, girls who understood her challenges without judgment, who shared tips, frustrations, and victories. Amanda was no longer alone. One day, a few months after Sophia's birth, Amanda received an unexpected message. It was from Roberto, Laura's husband. He and his wife would like to visit them, if Amanda felt comfortable. The young mother hesitated for only a moment before accepting. When the couple arrived the following weekend, bringing gifts for Sophia and a bouquet of flowers for Amanda, it was as if two families who had been connected by fate could finally celebrate together the miracle that had occurred that night in the hospital. Laura hugged Amanda with tears in her eyes. "You gave me the chance to see my son grow up," she said. "How could I ever thank you for that?" Amanda, holding Sophia, smiled. "Just live well. Be happy. That's gratitude enough." The friendship between Amanda and Laura's family blossomed in ways neither of them could have predicted. What began as gratitude transformed into something deeper, a genuine connection between two women from completely different worlds, united by an extraordinary night that had changed them both forever. Laura, the successful 32-year-old businesswoman, and Amanda, the teenage mother struggling to finish high school, discovered they had more in common than they imagined. Both were devoted mothers. Both knew the intensity of unconditional love. Both had faced their own fears and uncertainties. Laura began visiting Amanda regularly, bringing not only gifts for Sophia, but also practical advice, emotional support, and eventually, opportunities. She offered Amanda a part-time job at her company, something flexible that would allow the teenager to continue her studies while earning her own money. "It's not charity," Laura insisted when Amanda hesitated to accept. "You saved my life, my son's life. If I can help you build the life you deserve, that makes me happy. Besides, you're intelligent, responsible, and have a work ethic that many people twice your age don't have." Amanda gratefully accepted, and the job became another piece in the complex puzzle that was her new life. She worked 3 afternoons a week in Laura's office, doing simple administrative tasks, learning about the business world, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Laura became not just an employer, but a mentor, someone who saw potential in Amanda where others saw only a statistic. At night, after putting Sophia to bed, Amanda studied, determined not only to finish high school, but to do so with grades that would give her access to a college scholarship. She had discovered a passion for healthcare, inspired by Beatrice and her own experience in the hospital. She wanted to become a nurse. She wanted to be like those women who had stood by her side, offering compassion when she needed it most. The road would be long and difficult, but for the first time in her life, Amanda had a clear goal and the unwavering determination to achieve it. Meanwhile, Dr. Mariana Silvera was also undergoing her own transformation. The encounter with Amanda had been a turning point in her career and personal life. She began to question not only how she treated her teenage patients, but how she related to everyone around her. Mariana realized she had become bitter over the years, allowing the stress of her profession and her own personal disappointments to transform her into someone she no longer recognized. She had been divorced for 5 years, had no children by choice in favor of her career, and had gradually isolated herself from friends and family. Work had become her only identity, and in the process, she had lost the compassion that should have been at the heart of her medical practice. But the experience with Amanda had ignited something within her, a flame she thought was extinguished. Mariana began therapy, something she had resisted for years, believing it was weakness to need help. There, in the comfortable office of a patient psychologist, she finally confronted the origins of her cynicism and judgment. She discovered that much of her anger directed at young mothers stemmed from her own insecurities about choosing not to be a mother, and from the unconscious envy she felt for women who, despite adversity, had the courage to embrace motherhood in ways she had never allowed herself to consider. Therapy was painful, forcing her to look at parts of herself she preferred to keep hidden. But it was also liberating. Mariana began to rebuild relationships she had neglected, called old friends, visited her younger sister who lived in another city and with whom she hadn't spoken in over a year. And most importantly, she began to fundamentally change how she interacted with her patients. Each young pregnant woman who came to her office was now greeted not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity about her story, her circumstances, her dreams, and her fears. Mariana became a fierce advocate for support programs for young mothers in the hospital, using her influence and position to ensure that resources were allocated, that support groups were expanded, that no pregnant teenager felt as alone and judged as Amanda had felt on that fateful night. 6 months after Sophia's birth, something unexpected happened. Amanda's story had been discreetly shared among the hospital staff, but a local journalist, a friend of one of the residents, heard about the case and was fascinated. He contacted Amanda, asking permission to write an article about her experience. Amanda hesitated at first, afraid of exposure, afraid of further judgment, but Laura encouraged her. "Your story can inspire other girls in similar situations," she argued. It can show that being a young mother is not the end of life, but can be the beginning of something meaningful. Reluctantly, Amanda agreed, but on one condition. Dr. Mariana would also have to participate, sharing her own perspective and transformation. When the article was published in the local newspaper, the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people got in touch, sharing their own stories of teenage pregnancy, of being judged by the healthcare system, of overcoming adversity. But there were also negative comments. People arguing that Amanda was being glorified for irresponsibility, that she shouldn't be treated like a heroine just for doing what any decent person would do. Amanda read some of these comments and felt the old shame trying to return, that inner voice saying she didn't deserve anything good, that she was a mistake, a burden. But then she looked at Sophia, now 6 months old, smiling and babbling in her crib, and remembered everything she had accomplished. She remembered that she had saved 2 lives while bringing her own daughter into the world. She remembered that she was working, studying, building a future. And she realized that the opinion of those who judged her without knowing her simply didn't matter. What mattered was the opinion she had of herself, and that had completely changed. Amanda no longer saw herself as a victim or a mistake. She saw herself as a survivor, a fighter, a young mother who was doing the best she could under difficult circumstances. And that was more than enough. The story also had an unexpected impact on Dr. Mariana. Several medical colleagues contacted her, admitting that they too had treated young patients with prejudice, and thanking her for having the courage to publicly admit her mistakes. Mariana was invited to give lectures at medical conferences on implicit bias in the care of vulnerable patients, on the importance of compassion in medicine, and on how a moment of honesty and humility can transform not only individual lives, but systemic practices. A year had passed since that transformative night in the hospital. Amanda was now 18, had graduated high school with excellent grades, and had been accepted into a nursing program at a community college with a scholarship that covered most of the tuition. Sophia was growing up fast and healthy, a cheerful child who lit up every room she entered. Amanda's relationship with her mother had strengthened significantly. The 2 women had learned to communicate better, to establish healthy boundaries while also offering mutual support. Sophia's grandmother adored her unconditionally, and Amanda often came home from school or work to find the 2 of them playing together, the house filled with laughter. Even Amanda's father, who had been the harshest in his initial judgment, began to soften. He wasn't effusive in his displays of affection, but Amanda noticed the small changes. He started asking about her studies, about her work, about her plans for the future. Once, she found him holding Sophia, whispering to his granddaughter about how special she was, and Amanda had to leave the room to hide her tears. She had never imagined this would be possible, this family redemption, this gradual acceptance. The relationship between Amanda and Laura also continued to grow. Laura was not just a professional mentor, she had become a kind of older sister, a confidant, someone Amanda could talk to about anything. Laura and Sophia's children, despite the age difference, began playing together during visits, creating their own memories and connections. Roberto, Laura's husband, also developed a special affection for Amanda. He often joked that she was his family's guardian angel, but behind the jokes was a deep and genuine gratitude. Laura's company was thriving, and she began involving Amanda in increasingly complex projects, recognizing not only her work ethic, but also her intelligence and creativity. There were talks about Amanda taking on a more significant role in the company after graduating from university, perhaps combining her nursing knowledge with the corporate world in some innovative way. Amanda could hardly believe the doors that were opening for her, opportunities she never would have imagined possible just a year ago when she was lying on that cold stretcher, being judged and humiliated by a doctor who didn't know her story. Doctor. Mariana also maintained regular contact with Amanda. They met every few months for coffee, conversations that were therapeutic for both. Mariana enjoyed hearing about Amanda's progress at school, at work, and in motherhood. And Amanda appreciated the doctor's advice, her perspective as someone older and more experienced who genuinely cared about her well-being. During one of these meetings, Mariana shared something personal for the first time. You know, Amanda, I spent years telling myself that I don't regret not having children, and in many ways, that's true. My career brought me satisfaction. I saved many lives. I made a difference in the world. But meeting you, seeing the relationship you have with Sophia, the way you transformed something that could have destroyed you into something that strengthened you, it made me question some of the choices I made. Not that I necessarily wanted to change them, but it made me realize that I had closed doors out of fear, not out of real conviction. Amanda listened in silence, honored by the vulnerability the doctor was showing. "It's not too late," she said gently, "to change, to make different choices, to open new doors." Mariana smiled sadly. "Maybe not. But the most important thing I learned from you is that no matter what choices we make, what matters is how we treat each other along the way." I was so focused on my own frustrations and regrets that I projected them onto other people, especially young people like you, who were making different choices than mine. That wasn't right, and I'm grateful every day that you gave me the opportunity to recognize that and change. The two women embraced in that small cafe, two lives that should never have crossed paths in a meaningful way, but which had become fundamentally intertwined because of an extraordinary night. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes, but also genuine smiles. There was healing in that unlikely friendship, redemption for both in different ways. Amanda was learning that she had value and deserved respect, regardless of her circumstances. And Mariana was learning that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be from the start. Later that night, after putting Sophia to bed, Amanda sat at the kitchen table with her study books spread out in front of her. She had an important anatomy exam the following week and needed to study. But for a moment, she just stopped and looked around her small world. The modest apartment she now shared only with her mother and daughter, the photos of Sophia everywhere, the books that represented her dreams for the future. Amanda thought about how her life could have been different. If her boyfriend hadn't disappeared when she told him about the pregnancy, if her parents had supported her from the beginning, if Dr. Mariana had treated her with compassion that first night. But then she realized something important. All those difficulties, all that suffering, had shaped who she was now. She was stronger for having faced rejection, more compassionate for having experienced judgment, more determined for having been underestimated. If everything had been easy, she might never have discovered the depth of her own resilience. Sophia started crying in the next room, and Amanda immediately stood up. When she picked up her daughter, feeling the warm, familiar weight, she whispered, "You know you changed my life, right, little one? And not in the way people think. Yes, you made things harder in many ways, but you also gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to be better, to fight harder, to prove all those people who judged me wrong." Sophia looked at her with those big, curious eyes, not understanding the words but responding to the tone of voice with a toothless smile. Amanda laughed through the tears that suddenly blurred her vision. These were good tears this time, tears of gratitude for everything she had achieved, for all the good people who had entered her life, for all the lessons she had learned. She thought of Laura, who had gone from an anonymous patient to a dear friend and mentor. She thought of Beatrice, the nurse who had stayed by her side during the most difficult hours and then shared her own story of young motherhood. She thought of Dr. Mariana, who had made terrible mistakes, but had the courage to acknowledge them and change. She thought of her own mother, who was slowly learning to be the support Amanda needed. And she thought of herself, the frightened 17-year-old girl who had entered that hospital feeling like nothing and who now, a year later, knew she was something. She was a mother, a student, a worker, a friend, a daughter, and most importantly, she was a survivor with a bright future ahead. Amanda put Sophia back in her crib, now calmed, and returned to her studies. There was a lot of work to do, many obstacles still to overcome, but for the first time in her life, she genuinely believed she could do it. Not just survive, but thrive. Not just exist, but truly live a life with meaning and purpose. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. Sophia was now 3 years old, a talkative and energetic child who turned each day into an adventure. Amanda, at 20, was in the middle of her nursing program, consistently among the top students in her class. She had discovered a special passion for pediatric nursing, loved working with children and their families, offering the kind of compassion and understanding she herself had longed for during her pregnancy. Her clinical rotations were intense, often requiring long shifts at the hospital, but Amanda never complained. Each patient she cared for, each family she comforted, felt like she was honoring the experience that had brought her there. During one of her rotations, something remarkable happened. Amanda was working in the obstetrics department of the same hospital where Sophia had been born when a 15-year-old girl was admitted in labor. The girl was alone, frightened, being treated impatiently by some staff members who made comments about kids having kids. Amanda immediately recognized the look in the girl's eyes, shame mixed with fear, the overwhelming feeling of being judged by everyone around her. Without hesitation, Amanda asked to be assigned to care for that patient. She sat beside the stretcher, held the hand of the teenager whose name was Julia, and said in a soft voice, "I know exactly how you're feeling. I was a teenage mother, too. My daughter was born when I was 17, in this very hospital." "And I want you to know that you're not alone, that you're strong, and that this doesn't define the rest of your life." Julia began to cry, not from physical pain, but from relief at finally having someone who understood, who didn't judge her. Amanda stayed with her throughout the labor, offering not only medical care but also genuine emotional support, sharing parts of her own story, offering hope where there was only despair. When Julia's baby was finally born, a healthy girl whom the teenager decided to name Luna, Julia held Amanda's hand and said, "Thank you. You made me feel like maybe I can do this." "You will," Amanda replied with conviction. "It won't be easy, but you are stronger than you think, and there are people who will help you along the way, just as there were people who helped me." Amanda gave Julia information about support groups, available resources, and educational programs for young mothers. And in the following days, before Julia was discharged, Amanda visited her several times, building a connection she hoped would continue after they both left the hospital. The experience with Julia had a profound impact on Amanda. She realized that her calling wasn't just to be a nurse, but specifically to be an advocate for young mothers within the healthcare system. She wanted to be the person she herself had needed that night 3 years earlier. She wanted to ensure that no pregnant teenager felt as alone and judged as she had felt. Amanda began researching specialized programs, non-profit organizations that worked with young mothers, and ways to combine her nursing training with activism and public policy advocacy. She discussed these ideas with Laura, and her ever-supportive mentor was enthusiastic. "What if we created something?" Laura suggested over lunch. "An organization that connects young mothers with resources, mentors, and job opportunities. You could lead this, Amanda. You have the lived experience, you're acquiring the professional credentials, and you have the passion. I can help with the business side, with seed funding." Amanda was stunned by the proposal. "But I haven't even finished college yet. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." Laura smiled. "No one is ever completely ready. But you have something that no amount of preparation can give you. Authenticity. You've lived it. The girls who need help will trust you because you truly understand." The idea gradually began to take shape. Laura used her business connections to help Amanda develop a business plan. Dr. Mariana, upon learning of the project, offered her support, agreeing to serve on the advisory board and help establish connections within the healthcare system. Beatrice, the nurse who had been so important to Amanda during her own childbirth, also joined, bringing not only her professional experience but also her own story as a young mother. Even Roberto, Laura's husband, contributed, offering free legal advice to help establish the organization as a non-profit entity. Within a few months, what had begun as a vague idea had transformed into a concrete plan. The organization would be called Project Sophia, in honor of Amanda's daughter, and its mission would be to offer comprehensive support to teenage mothers, counseling, educational resources, assistance in finding employment, support groups, and connections with compassionate healthcare professionals. The goal was not just to help these young mothers survive, but to thrive, to reach their full potential despite the obstacles they faced. The launch of Project Sophia took place on a sunny Saturday morning, 3.5 years after Sophia's birth. The event was held in a community hall provided free of charge by a local church, and the response far exceeded anyone's expectations. Dozens of people showed up, young mothers seeking support, healthcare professionals interested in volunteering, community members wanting to help, even some local journalists covering the story. Amanda was nervous as she prepared to speak to the audience. Sophia, now a precocious 3.5-year-old, sat in the front row next to her grandmother, swinging her legs and smiling at her mother. When Amanda stepped onto the small makeshift stage, she looked at all those hopeful faces and felt a wave of emotion. "My name is Amanda, and I became a mother at 17, she began, her voice initially trembling but gaining strength with each word. When I was pregnant, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. People judged me wherever I went. At school, conversations stopped when I entered the room. At the hospital, I was treated with disdain by a doctor who assumed she knew everything about me based solely on my age. I felt invisible, worthless, as if my life had ended before it had even truly begun. Amanda paused, discreetly wiping away a tear. But I was wrong about my life being over. In fact, it was just beginning in a way I could never have predicted. Yes, the journey has been difficult. Yes, there are days when I feel exhausted and overwhelmed. But I've also discovered a strength within myself that I didn't know existed. I've discovered that I matter, that my life has value, that I can make a difference in the world. She pointed to where Laura and Dr. Mariana were sitting together. And I discovered that there are good people in this world who are willing to help, who see beyond the circumstances and recognize the potential in every person. That's why we're here today. Project Sophia exists because I believe that no young mother should have to go through what I went through alone. No girl should feel worthless because she made a decision that society disapproves of. Each one of you here today, every young mother who is struggling and questioning whether she can do this, I want you to know, you can. You are stronger than you imagine, more capable than you believe, and more worthy of love and respect than you have ever been told. The audience erupted in applause, and Amanda saw that she wasn't the only one crying. Many of the young mothers present were wiping their eyes, nodding, clearly seeing themselves in Amanda's story. After her speech, Dr. Mariana also spoke, courageously sharing her own journey of recognizing and confronting her biases. As healthcare professionals, as community members, as human beings, we have a responsibility to treat all people with dignity and compassion, she said, her voice heavy with conviction. I failed in that with Amanda when I met her, and that mistake haunts me to this day. But it also taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. Never assume you know someone's story. Never judge based on appearances or circumstances. Every person you meet is fighting battles you can't see, carrying burdens you can't imagine. The smallest kindness you offer can make a huge difference. Laura then spoke about her own role in the story, about how Amanda had literally saved her life and her son's, and how that experience had transformed her perspective on gratitude and community responsibility. I had everything in life: career, family, financial stability. But it took almost dying and being saved by a teenager whom society had discarded for me to truly understand what it means to be part of a community. We rise together or fall together. There is no them and us. There is only us. After the formal speeches, the event turned into a more casual gathering. Tables were set up with information about available resources, educational programs, childcare assistance, career counseling, support groups. Healthcare professionals offered free consultations. Local business owners announced internship programs specifically for young mothers. The atmosphere was charged with hope and possibility. Amanda circulated the room, talking to everyone present, listening to stories, offering encouragement, connecting young mothers with resources. She met a 16-year-old girl who had just discovered she was pregnant and was terrified about telling her parents. She met a 19-year-old with 2 children who was trying to finish high school while working full-time. She met a 20-year-old mother who had been kicked out of her home and was living in a shelter. Each story was different, but they all shared common threads: fear, shame, determination, hope. And each of them needed exactly what Project Sophia was offering: a community that said, "You are not alone. You have value. We believe in you." In the months following its launch, Project Sophia grew beyond Amanda's most optimistic expectations. Over 50 young mothers enrolled in the program in the first 3 months. Volunteers appeared, offering their time, skills, and resources. Donations began to pour in, allowing the organization to expand its services. Amanda, still balancing her nursing studies with the work of building the organization, often felt overwhelmed. There were nights when she barely slept, dividing her time between studying for exams, caring for Sophia, and managing the endless details of a growing organization. But even in the most difficult moments, she never doubted that she was doing exactly what she should be doing. One of Project Sophia's first major victories came when they managed to establish a formal partnership with the hospital where Amanda had given birth. The hospital administration, thanks in part to Dr. Mariana's tireless advocacy, agreed to implement a mandatory training program for the entire obstetrics team on how to treat adolescent patients with compassion and respect. They also agreed to have representatives from Project Sophia available at the hospital to connect with young mothers immediately after giving birth, offering resources and support during their most vulnerable and receptive time. Amanda was invited to help develop the training curriculum, an experience that was both exciting and challenging. She had to revisit her own painful experience, but now with the goal of transforming it into an educational tool that could prevent others from going through the same thing. During one of the training sessions, Amanda shared her story with a room full of nurses, doctors, and social workers. She spared no detail about how she had felt when she was judged by Dr. Mariana. How those harsh words had cut deeply, how dehumanized she had felt. And then she explained how, even in that moment of extreme pain, she had made the choice to help another person, to donate blood that would save Laura's life and that of her baby. "You never really know who's sitting in front of you," she told the attentive audience. "That teenager you might be judging here could be the very person who will save a life, who will make a difference in the world in ways you can't imagine." Treat every patient, regardless of age or circumstances, as if they were the most important person in the world, because to them, at that moment, you are everything. The room fell silent when Amanda finished speaking, then erupted in applause. Several healthcare professionals approached afterward to thank her, some with tears in their eyes, admitting that they too had been guilty of judging young patients. An older nurse with decades of experience hugged Amanda and whispered, "Thank you for reminding us why we chose this profession. Sometimes we get lost in the routine, in the stress, and we forget that each chart number is a real person with a real story." The impact of the training was immediate and measurable. Within weeks, Amanda began hearing stories from teenage mothers who had given birth at that hospital and recounted experiences completely different from what was common before. They spoke of nurses who treated them with kindness, of doctors who explained procedures patiently, of social workers who offered resources without judgment. It was exactly the change Amanda had dreamed of creating. Meanwhile, Amanda's personal life was also flourishing in unexpected ways. She had started dating again, something she had avoided in the early years after Sophia's birth, focusing all her energy on being a mother and building her future. But now, feeling more secure in herself and her path, she allowed herself to open her heart. Daniel was a classmate, a few years older, who was also in the nursing program. He had been raised by a single mother and had deep respect for what Amanda had achieved. He wasn't intimidated by the fact that she had a daughter. On the contrary, the way she balanced motherhood with education and volunteer work was one of the things he admired most about her. The relationship developed slowly, carefully. Amanda was cautious about introducing someone new to Sophia, not wanting to confuse the girl or create attachments that could be broken. But when she finally introduced Daniel to her daughter, the chemistry between them was immediate. Daniel had a natural ease with children, played at Sophia's level, listened to her with genuine attention, never tried to force a father figure role but was simply present in meaningful ways. For the first time since becoming a mother, Amanda began to imagine what it would be like to have a true partner, someone who would support her and share the joys and challenges of life. Not that she needed someone to complete her. She had learned that she was complete on her own, but having someone to share the journey with made everything a little lighter, a little sweeter. As Amanda approached graduation from her nursing program, she often reflected on the incredible journey she had taken. 5 years ago, she was a frightened 17-year-old, pregnant, and feeling like her life was over. Now, at 22, she was about to become a registered nurse, had founded a nonprofit that was transforming lives, had a healthy and loving relationship, and most importantly, was the mother of a bright and happy little girl who inspired her every day. Project Sophia now served over 150 young mothers, offering everything from weekly support groups to career mentoring programs. They had expanded to include a scholarship fund that had already helped 12 teenage mothers pay for community college or vocational training programs. Laura had become the chair of the board of directors, using her business skills to ensure the organization was financially sustainable and strategically sound. Dr. Mariana remained deeply involved, not only as a member of the advisory board, but frequently giving talks about her own transformation, becoming a national voice on the importance of eliminating bias in healthcare. She had even written an article for a major medical journal about her experience with Amanda, an act of public vulnerability that had resonated with thousands of healthcare professionals across the country. The article generated invitations to speak at national conferences, and Mariana used every opportunity to emphasize that compassion was not optional in medicine, it was fundamental. One of the most touching stories to emerge from Project Sophia was that of Julia, the 15-year-old Amanda had helped during her clinical internship. Julia had joined the program after leaving the hospital and, with the support she received, was able not only to complete high school, but to do so with honors. She was now planning to go to college, wanting to become a social worker so she could help other young mothers. Julia often said that Amanda had saved her life, but Amanda always corrected her. "You saved your own life. I just showed you that it was possible." The relationship between the two had developed into a deep friendship, with Julia even offering to take care of Sophia occasionally, allowing Amanda a few hours to study or simply breathe. Seeing Julia thrive was one of Amanda's greatest joys, a tangible confirmation that the work she was doing had a real and lasting impact. Amanda's graduation ceremony was an emotional event, not only for her, but for everyone who had been part of her journey. The room was filled with people who loved and supported her, her mother and father, both now proud and vocal about their daughter's achievements. Sophia, now 5.5 years old, wearing a special dress and holding a bouquet of flowers for her mom. Daniel, who had become a constant and loving presence in their lives. Laura and Roberto with their 2 children. Dr. Mariana, Beatrice, and dozens of young mothers from the Sophia Project who had come to celebrate the woman who had inspired them so much. When Amanda's name was called and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, the ovation was deafening. Tears streamed down her face as she held the certificate that represented years of hard work, sleepless nights studying while Sophia slept, and countless sacrifices. But more than the diploma itself, that moment represented a promise fulfilled. The promise she had made to herself that night in the hospital. That she would be more than people expected. That she would prove that being a young mother wasn't the end of her dreams, but could be the beginning of something extraordinary. After the ceremony, there was a small party at Laura and Roberto's house. The garden was decorated with balloons and banners. There was a table full of food, and in the center of it all, a huge cake with the words, "Congratulations, Nurse Amanda," written in pink icing. Sophia ran through the garden with Laura's children, their laughter filling the air. Amanda was surrounded by people who loved her, each representing a different chapter of her journey. Her mother approached, holding her daughter's hands. The older woman's eyes were filled with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, "for not believing in you from the beginning, for letting fear and worry about what others would think stop me from giving you the support you deserved. You're the strongest person I know, Amanda, and I'm so proud of you." Amanda hugged her mother, feeling the weight of years of tension finally dissolve completely. "We made it here, Mom. That's what matters." Daniel joined them, gently placing his arm around Amanda's waist. He had become more than a boyfriend. He had become a true partner, someone who supported her unconditionally, who celebrated her victories and comforted her during challenges. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered in her ear. "You're amazing." As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Amanda found a quiet moment for herself. She sat on a bench in the corner of the garden, watching Sophia play, listening to the murmur of conversations and laughter around her. "Doctor," Mariana joined her, sitting beside her in comfortable silence before speaking. "You know you've changed my life as much as I've changed yours, right?" the doctor said softly. Amanda looked at her in surprise. "I don't know about that. You were already an established, successful doctor." "But I had lost the essence of what it means to be a doctor," Mariana interrupted. "I was technically competent, but emotionally disconnected." I had allowed years of stress and personal disappointments to turn me into someone hard and judgmental. You forced me to face that, to acknowledge that I was causing harm to the patients I had sworn to help. That awareness was painful, but it was also liberating. In recent years, working with you on Project Sophia, reconnecting with the compassion that should be at the heart of my practice, I rediscovered why I became a doctor in the first place. So thank you, Amanda. For giving me a second chance, for showing me that it's never too late to change. The two women embraced, two souls that had met at the right time, each needing what the other had to offer. When they parted, Amanda said, "You know, I was thinking, now that I've graduated, I'd like to work in the hospital, specifically in the obstetrics department. I want to be there for other girls like me at the time when they most need someone who understands." Mariana smiled broadly. "I was expecting you to say that. I've already spoken to management. There's a position waiting for you, if you want it. Not just as a nurse, but as coordinator of the new adolescent patient support program we're implementing. It would be a unique role, combining clinical care with advocacy and emotional support." Amanda felt her heart race. It was exactly the kind of position she had dreamed of, something that would allow her to use all her skills and experience to make the biggest difference possible. "I would love to," she replied without hesitation. "When can I start?" While they discussed the details, Sophia ran over to them, throwing herself into Amanda's lap with the boundless energy of a 5-year-old. "Mommy! Mommy! I'm hungry!" Amanda laughed, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "Let's eat, then." It's a feast, after all. 6 months after graduation, Amanda was completely immersed in her new role at the hospital. She had developed a comprehensive protocol for the care of teenage mothers that was being implemented throughout the obstetrics department. Every pregnant teenager who arrived at the hospital was now automatically connected with Amanda or a member of her team. They received not only medical care, but also information about available resources, contact numbers for support groups, and most importantly, compassionate and respectful treatment from the entire staff. The transformation was remarkable. Before, teenage mothers often avoided seeking prenatal care for fear of judgment. Now, with the hospital's growing reputation as a safe and welcoming place, more and more young mothers were seeking care. The rates of complications during pregnancy and childbirth among teenagers at that hospital had decreased significantly, a direct testament to the power of compassion and appropriate support. Amanda was also working with local schools, giving talks on pregnancy prevention, but also on eliminating stigma and offering support when pregnancy occurred. She didn't sugarcoat the realities of the challenges of being a young mother, but she also refused to perpetuate the narrative that teenage pregnancy was automatically a life sentence of poverty and failure. "Your circumstances don't define your destiny," she told audiences of teenagers. "Yes, being a young mother makes things harder, but hard doesn't mean impossible." And most importantly, if you or someone you know is in this situation, know that there are people who want to help, who won't judge, who believe in you. One of her presentations was filmed and shared on social media, going viral. Suddenly, Amanda was receiving messages from all over the country from young mothers thanking her for finally having someone representing their experiences with honesty and hope. She was invited to give interviews on local radio and television programs. A national magazine did a cover story on Project Sophia and Amanda's story. The attention was, at times, overwhelming. Amanda had never sought fame or recognition. She just wanted to help. But she also recognized that the platform she was gaining could be used to amplify her message, to reach more people who needed to hear that they weren't alone, that there was hope. Daniel, always her safe haven, helped keep Amanda grounded during these moments. "Remember why you're doing this," he would say, when she felt overwhelmed by the attention. "It's not about you, it's about all the girls you're helping, all the lives you're touching." On a particularly beautiful autumn afternoon, Amanda received an unexpected call. It was from a documentary producer at a major streaming network. They wanted to make a documentary about Project Sophia, about Amanda's journey, about how one night in the hospital had triggered a chain of events that was transforming the healthcare system for young mothers across the country. Amanda was hesitant. The idea of exposing her life so publicly, of allowing cameras to follow not only her but also Sophia, was daunting. She talked to everyone in her life: her mother, Daniel, Laura, Dr. Mariana. Everyone had opinions, but they all agreed on one thing. It was Amanda's decision. Finally, it was Sophia who helped Amanda decide. Now 6 years old and precocious beyond her years, Sophia asked, "Mommy, will this help other moms like you?" Amanda nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. It can help many people understand that being a young mother is nothing to be ashamed of. It can show that families come in all shapes and sizes, and all are valuable." Sophia thought for a moment, then said with the simplicity and wisdom of a child, "Then you should do it. You always tell me we should help people when we can." Amanda laughed through sudden tears, hugging her daughter. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from you, Mom," Sophia replied, and those simple words sealed Amanda's decision. She agreed to participate in the documentary. Filming lasted several months. Cameras followed Amanda in the hospital as she worked with teenage mothers. They captured Project Sophia meetings, showing the support and camaraderie among the young mothers. They interviewed Laura, who shared her perspective on how Amanda literally saved her life. Dr. Mariana gave a brutally honest interview about her own biases and transformation. Beatrice spoke about the importance of healthcare professionals who genuinely care. And Daniel, with Amanda's consent, spoke about what it was like to love a woman who was simultaneously a mother, a nurse, an activist, and a dreamer. But the most powerful moments in the documentary were the intimate ones. Amanda helping Sophia with her homework at the kitchen table. The two of them preparing dinner together, Sophia standing on a stool to reach the counter. Movie nights where they snuggled on the sofa. Bedtime conversations where Sophia asked a million questions and Amanda answered each one patiently. These scenes showed what no statistic or speech could, that in the end, they were simply a mother and daughter who loved each other, facing life together, not so different from any other family. When the documentary was finally released, the impact was immediate and profound. Within days, it became one of the most watched programs on the platform. Comments flooded social media, the majority overwhelmingly positive. Young mothers from around the world shared their own stories, thanking Amanda for giving voice to their experiences. Healthcare professionals initiated conversations about how to eliminate biases in their own practices. Schools began using excerpts from the documentary in educational programs. Nonprofit organizations across the country reached out asking how they could replicate the Project Sophia model in their own communities. Amanda and her team developed a detailed guide and made it freely available online, encouraging others to adapt it to their specific local needs. Within a year of the documentary's release, Project Sophia-inspired programs had been established in 15 different states. Of course, not all the reaction was positive. There were those who argued that Amanda was glorifying teenage pregnancy, that she was sending the wrong message to young people. Amanda responded to these criticisms with grace and patience, always emphasizing that she was not encouraging anyone to become pregnant young, but simply advocating that those who did deserved compassion and support, not judgment and abandonment. Rejecting and humiliating young mothers does not prevent teenage pregnancy, she said in interviews. Comprehensive sexual health education prevents it. Access to contraception prevents it. But when a young woman is pregnant, our job as a society is not to punish her, it is to support her, to ensure that both she and her child have the best possible chance to thrive. The visibility also brought unexpected opportunities. Amanda was invited to speak at the Pan American Health Organization about best practices in the care of adolescent mothers. Universities invited her as a guest speaker. A large children's hospital offered her a position as director of programs for adolescent mothers with a salary that would have been unimaginable to her just a few years earlier. It was tempting. The position came with significant resources, the ability to impact policy at an institutional level, and professional recognition. But accepting it would mean leaving the hospital where her own journey had begun. It would mean moving to another city, taking Sophia out of her school, leaving the support network they had carefully built. Amanda agonized over the decision for weeks. One night, after putting Sophia to bed, Amanda sat with Daniel on the balcony of their small apartment. They had moved to a slightly larger place the previous year, but it was still modest compared to what their new salary could afford. "What do you think I should do?" Amanda asked, her voice betraying her confusion. Daniel took her hand. "It's not about what I think. It's about what you want. What is your heart telling you?" Amanda was silent for a long moment, gazing at the star-studded night sky. "My heart is telling me I belong here," she finally said. "It's not about the money or the prestige. It's about being where I can make the biggest difference." And that's here, in this community, with the girls who come to Project Sophia, with the patients I see at the hospital. They don't need someone from outside with impressive credentials. They need someone who understands, because they've lived it. They need me. Daniel smiled, pulling her into a hug. Then you already know your answer. Amanda declined the position, but in a way that opened doors instead of closing them. She proposed a consultancy where she could help the Children's Hospital develop its programs while remaining based in her own community. They enthusiastically accepted, and Amanda discovered she could have the best of both worlds, impacting large-scale programs while remaining rooted in direct work with patients she loved. As Sophia grew older, entering her primary school years, she began to more fully understand the uniqueness of her own story. Children at school would sometimes comment on how young her mother was compared to other mothers. Sophia, with the resilience only children possess, learned to respond with pride. My mother had me when she was a teenager. She is brave and strong, and she helps many people. Amanda made a point of always being open with Sophia about the circumstances of her birth, adapting the conversation to the girl's age. She didn't want Sophia to find out through gossip or malicious comments. She wanted her daughter to know the whole truth. That yes, Amanda was young, that yes, it was difficult, but that Sophia was never, not for a second, unwanted or a burden. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Amanda often said. You made me stronger, more focused, more compassionate. You gave me a purpose. And Sophia, wise beyond her years, always replied, and you gave me an incredible life, Mom. 10 years had passed since that transformative night at the hospital. Amanda was now 27, an experienced nurse, director of programs at her hospital, and founder of a national organization that had impacted thousands of lives. Sophia was 15, a bright and compassionate teenager who spoke of wanting to follow in her mother's footsteps in healthcare. The Sophia Project had grown beyond Amanda's wildest dreams. They now had chapters in 30 states, an annual budget of millions of dollars, a full-time staff, and connections with hundreds of partner organizations. Amanda had written a book about her journey, which became a bestseller and whose profits went entirely to funding scholarships for young mothers. Laura was still chair of the board, now a friend so close she was practically family. Her children and Sophia had grown up together, more like cousins than anything else. Dr. Mariana had become a nationally recognized speaker on medical ethics and compassion in healthcare. She had published several articles and even a book on how healthcare professionals can recognize and confront their own biases. And through it all, she credited Amanda as her greatest teacher. Beatrice had become a nursing supervisor at the hospital and worked closely with Amanda on support programs. Daniel and Amanda had married 3 years earlier in an intimate ceremony with only close family and friends. Sophia had been the maid of honor, radiant in her pink dress, shedding happy tears as she watched her mother marry the man who had become a loving father figure to her. And Amanda's mother, who had gone through her own journey from judgment to acceptance to celebration, had held her daughter's hand before she walked down the aisle and whispered, "I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become." That spring, the hospital held a special event, a dedication ceremony for the new maternity ward, which was being named in honor of Project Sophia. It was a recognition of the transformative impact the program had had not only on individual patients, but on the culture and practice of the entire hospital. At the ceremony, Amanda was on stage alongside Dr. Mariana, Laura, Beatriz, and several of the first young mothers that Project Sophia had supported, including Julia, who was now a social worker at another hospital, helping families in crisis. The auditorium was packed with hundreds of people, healthcare professionals, past and present patients, community members, civic leaders, and journalists. When Amanda was called to speak, she looked at the audience and saw faces that represented each chapter of her extraordinary journey. She saw Sophia sitting in the front row next to Daniel, her daughter now almost a woman, beautiful and confident. She saw her mother and father, both with tears of pride in their eyes. She saw dozens of young mothers she had helped over the years, each with their own stories of struggle and triumph. And she saw, in the last row, a pregnant teenager who had been her patient just the previous week, someone who was at the beginning of her own journey. 10 years ago, Amanda began, her voice firm and clear, I was a scared 17-year-old who walked into this hospital feeling like my life was over. I was judged, I was humiliated, I was treated as if I were less than human. But that very night, something extraordinary happened. I had the opportunity to save 2 lives by donating blood during my own labor. And in that moment, I realized something fundamental. My life wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Amanda paused, letting her words resonate. But here's the truth. No one told me when I was 17. The truth I want every young mother here today to know. You shouldn't have to save lives to be treated with dignity. You shouldn't have to prove your worth to deserve compassion. Every person who walks through the doors of this hospital, regardless of age, race, socioeconomic circumstances, or life choices, deserves to be treated with respect and care. Period. Applause erupted, but Amanda gently raised her hand to continue. What we've built here over the last 10 years isn't just a program. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about young mothers, in how we think about judgment versus compassion, in how we think about human potential. Every young mother has a story. Everyone has dreams. Everyone deserves the chance to thrive, not just survive. Amanda turned to Dr. Mariana, who stood beside her with tears streaming down her face. This woman here judged me that night 10 years ago. And I could have held on to anger. I could have allowed that experience to define me negatively. But instead, we both chose something different. She chose humility and change. I chose forgiveness and action. And together, we created something that is changing lives across the country. Dr. Mariana nodded, unable to speak through her emotion. But the work isn't finished, Amanda continued, her voice gaining intensity. There are still many places where teenage mothers are treated with contempt. There are still schools that expel pregnant girls. There are still families that reject their daughters when they need support the most. There is still a deeply ingrained stigma in our society that says teenage pregnancy is a shame, a failure, a burden. And as long as that stigma exists, our work continues. Amanda looked directly at the pregnant teenager in the last row, making eye contact. To every young mother here today, or to anyone watching or hearing about this story later, I want you to know, you are not alone. You are not a failure. You are not a burden. You are a complete, complex person, capable of extraordinary things. Yes, the path ahead is challenging. I won't lie about that. There will be nights when you cry from exhaustion. There will be times when you question whether you can do this. But you can, and you don't have to do it alone. Amanda's voice grew softer, more intimate, as if she were speaking directly to each person in the room. I know because I've lived it. I know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night to a crying baby when you're practically a child yourself. I know what it's like to sit in a classroom trying to concentrate on algebra when you're worried about who will take care of your child while you're at school. I know what it's like to see your friends going out to parties while you're at home changing diapers. I know what every judgmental look, every whispered comment, every door that seems to close in front of you feels like. Amanda took a deep breath, discreetly wiping away a tear. But I also know what it's like to look into your child's eyes and feel a love so profound that it transcends everything. I know what it's like to discover strengths you didn't know you had. I know what it's like to prove all those people who doubted you wrong, and I know what it's like, years later, to look back and realize that the moment that seemed like the end was actually the beginning of something meaningful and beautiful. Sophia, seated in the front row, was openly crying now, as were many others in the auditorium. Amanda gestured for her daughter to join her on stage. Sophia hesitated only a moment before standing and walking to her mother. When she reached the stage, Amanda hugged her and then turned to the audience, keeping her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "This is my Sophia," Amanda said, her voice full of pride. "She's 15 now, almost the same age I was when I found out I was pregnant. And sometimes I wonder what I would say to that 17-year-old Amanda, scared and alone in the hospital, if I could go back in time." I would say, "You're going to meet your daughter soon, and she's going to be the most incredible person you've ever met. She's going to be kind, intelligent, compassionate. She's going to make you laugh when you think you'll never smile again. She's going to give you purpose when you feel you have none." And one day, you'll be on a stage receiving honors for transforming your pain into something that helps thousands of other people, and your daughter will be by your side and you'll realize you wouldn't change a thing. Sophia wiped her eyes and picked up the microphone, surprising Amanda. "May I speak?" she asked softly. Amanda nodded, giving Sophia space to address the audience. The teenager took a deep breath, clearly nervous, but when she began to speak, her voice was firm. "I grew up knowing that my mother had me when she was young. Some kids at school would sometimes try to tease me about it, saying my mom had ruined her life. But I always knew the truth. My mom is my hero. She raised me while finishing high school. She worked and studied nursing while taking care of me. She founded an organization that helps thousands of people. And through it all, she always had time for me." Always made me feel loved. Always made me feel like I was the most important thing in her life. Sophia's voice wavered slightly, but she continued. "People talk about teenage pregnancy as if it's the worst mistake anyone can make. But looking at my life, at the love I have from my mother, my grandmother, all the incredible people who are part of our extended family, I don't see a mistake. I see strength. I see love. I see a woman who transformed a difficult situation into something beautiful. And when I grow up, I want to be exactly like my mother." There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium when Sophia finished speaking. Amanda pulled her into a tight hug, whispering, "I love you so much," in her daughter's ear. When they parted, Laura joined them on stage, followed by Dr. Mariana and Beatrice. The four women stood side by side, each representing a different aspect of the story. Amanda, the young mother who had overcome unimaginable adversity. Sophia, the next generation growing up with love and possibilities. Laura, the woman whose life had been saved and who had reciprocated with unwavering support. Dr. Mariana, the professional who had confronted her own demons and transformed herself. And Beatrice, the nurse who had offered compassion at a crucial moment and continued to offer it every day. "We are what is possible when we choose compassion instead of judgment," Laura said, taking the microphone. "When Amanda donated blood that night, she literally saved my life and my son's life. But what she may not realize is that she also saved my soul." She taught me about true gratitude, about not taking anything for granted, about using privilege and resources to uplift others. Before that night, I was so focused on building my career, on accumulating success, that I had forgotten what really matters: human connection, community, making a difference in other people's lives. Dr. Mariana then took the microphone. "I was a good doctor technically, but a terrible professional in terms of compassion. Amanda taught me that medical knowledge without humanity is insufficient, that every patient deserves to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity. This lesson transformed not only my medical practice but my entire life. and I am grateful every day that Amanda had the generosity of spirit to forgive me and give me the chance to be better. Beatrice was the last to speak. I was a young mother too, and I know that having someone who understands, who doesn't judge, can make all the difference. That's why I became a nurse, so I could be that person for others. And seeing Amanda not only survive but thrive and then create an entire movement to support other young mothers, that inspires me every day to be better at my own job. We all have the power to change lives. Sometimes with grand gestures, like Amanda donating blood or founding an organization. But more often with small acts of kindness, of truly seeing people, of offering a hand instead of judgment. After the formal ceremony, there was a reception in the hospital lobby, which had been transformed with decorations and food tables. The new maternity ward was open for tours, and many people walked through the modern and welcoming corridors, admiring the private delivery rooms, the recreation area for older siblings, the space dedicated to support groups, and the library with parenting resources. Everything had been designed with the input of Amanda and the Project Sophia team, ensuring that every aspect was welcoming and not intimidating. Amanda circulated through the reception area, chatting with dozens of people. She stopped to talk at length with the pregnant teenager she had seen in the last row during her speech. The girl, who introduced herself as Maria, was only 16 years old and 7 months pregnant. Her eyes were red from crying. "I didn't know it was possible," Maria said in a trembling voice. "I didn't know I could have a life after this. Everyone tells me I've ruined everything, that I'll never go to college, that I'll be poor forever." Amanda took Maria's hands in hers. "Everyone was wrong about me too, and they're wrong about you. I'm not going to lie and say it will be easy. It won't be, but it will be possible, and you won't do it alone. We're going to support you. Project Sophia will support you." "I personally will make sure you have everything you need." She handed Maria her card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. "Call me anytime. I mean it." Maria held the card as if it were the most precious item in the world, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much this means." But Amanda knew. She knew exactly, because she had been exactly where Maria was now, feeling hopeless and alone. And she had vowed to herself that she would do everything in her power to ensure that no other girl had to feel that way. In another corner of the reception area, Dr. Mariana was talking to a group of medical residents, sharing lessons about the importance of self-reflection and the willingness to recognize and confront biases. One of the residents, a young woman, asked, "But how did you know you were being prejudiced? How did you recognize it?" Mariana thought carefully before answering. "Honestly, I didn't recognize it at the time. I was so immersed in my own judgments that they seemed justified, even objective. It was only when I saw the contrast, how I treated Amanda versus how I treated Laura, that the reality hit me. And even then, it took courage to really look at myself and admit that I was wrong. The first step," Dr. Mariana continued, "is to recognize that we all have biases. No matter how well-intentioned we are, we all carry assumptions about people based on age, race, social class, appearance. The trick is not to pretend we don't have these biases, but to acknowledge them and actively work to not let them influence how we treat people. Ask yourself, would I treat this patient the same way if they were a different age, a different race, a different social class? If the answer is no, then you need to examine why. The residents listened attentively, some taking notes. It was rare to find someone so senior being so vulnerable about their own shortcomings. Meanwhile, Laura was in deep conversation with several mothers from Project Sophia, discussing job opportunities at her company and partner companies. She had expanded her commitment over the years, not only offering jobs but creating specific training programs, flexible schedules that accommodated childcare needs, and even subsidized childcare assistance. "You have valuable skills," she told the group. "Resilience, the ability to manage multiple responsibilities, empathy, determination. These are qualities that any employer should value. The problem is that many employers have the same prejudices as society in general." My goal is to change that, to prove that investing in young mothers isn't charity, it's good business. One of the mothers, a 19-year-old named Camilla, who had been in the program for 6 months, spoke shyly. "I never thought that someone like you, someone so successful, would care about someone like me." I felt invisible. But Project Sophia, you, Amanda, all of you made me feel seen for the first time in years. Laura smiled warmly. "You've always been visible, Camila." "You've always had value. Sometimes we just need people to remind us of that until we can believe it for ourselves." Across the room, Daniel was talking to Roberto and Laura's 2 children, who were now teenagers. They were discussing the importance of raising children who don't judge, who see beyond superficial circumstances. "Sophia is one of the most compassionate people I know," said Laura's eldest son, now 15, the same age as Sophia. "She never judges anyone." "I think it's because she's seen how judgment hurts. She taught me a lot about not making assumptions about people." Daniel nodded proudly. "Sophia has an amazing mother as an example. Amanda faces the world with so much grace, even when people still make comments or have opinions. She taught me that other people's opinions of you don't define who you are. Only your own opinion matters." As the afternoon wore on and the reception began to disperse, Amanda found a quiet moment in one of the new maternity rooms. She stood there alone for a few minutes, looking around the space that seemed so different from the cold, impersonal room where Sophia had been born. This one was warm, welcoming, designed to make mothers feel safe and supported. There was a comfortable chair for partners or family members, soft lighting that could be adjusted, and soothing decor on the walls. It was exactly the kind of environment she wished she had had that night 10 years ago. Dr. Mariana entered quietly, standing beside Amanda. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. Amanda smiled, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm thinking about how everything has changed, how I've changed, how you've changed, how this hospital has changed. 10 years ago, I was lying in a room not far from here, feeling like nothing. And now, her voice faltered. Now you are everything, Mariana finished. You are a force for change, Amanda. You transformed your pain into purpose, your shame into pride, your isolation into community. That's extraordinary. Amanda shook her head. It wasn't just me. It was you having the courage to change. It was Laura offering support when she didn't have to. It was Beatrice standing by my side when I was most scared. It was my mother finally overcoming her own shame and fears. It was Daniel loving me despite all the baggage I carried. It was all the people who chose to see me as a person, not as a statistic. We did this together. The two women were silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of everything that had happened, everything they had built together. Then Mariana said, "You know, when I graduated from medical school over 20 years ago, I had all these ideals about the kind of doctor I would be. Compassionate, present, someone who really made a difference. But somewhere along the way, I lost that. The job wore me down. I became cynical, distant. And then you came into my life and forced me to confront who I had become versus who I wanted to be. You gave me the chance to redeem myself, to become the doctor I was always meant to be. For that, I owe you a gratitude I can't adequately express." Amanda turned to hug Mariana. "You don't owe me anything. We saved each other that night. I saved Laura's life. You saved my soul by showing me that even people who hurt us can change, can grow, can become allies." That night, after everyone had left and the family was back home, Amanda tucked Sophia into bed even though her daughter was already 15 and technically didn't need to anymore. It was a ritual they both cherished, a time to talk about the day, about life, about anything. "How are you feeling about everything today?" Amanda asked, sitting on the edge of Sophia's bed. Sophia thought for a moment. "I'm proud of you, proud to be a part of this story, but also a little scared." "Scared of what, darling?" Sophia bit her lip. "Sometimes I worry that people only see me as the daughter of the teenage mother. Like that's my only defining characteristic. And I know our story is important, that you're helping so many people by sharing it. But sometimes I just want to be Sophia, you know? Not the daughter from the documentary or the organization. Just me." Amanda felt her heart clench. She hadn't fully realized how all the public attention might be affecting Sophia. "You have every right to feel this way," she said gently. "And I'm sorry if I didn't realize this was weighing on you. You know you can always tell me if things are getting too much, right? Your privacy, your well-being are more important than any program or cause." Sophia nodded. "I know. And I want to make it clear. I don't regret the documentary or today. I really wanted to talk. I just sometimes need space to just be a normal teenager." "You deserve that," Amanda replied. "And we're going to make that happen. We're going to establish clearer boundaries about what's public and what's private. Your life isn't content. Your life is yours." The two talked for another hour, establishing guidelines on how to navigate public attention while protecting Sophia's privacy and normalcy. It was a conversation they should have had sooner, but Amanda was grateful they were having it now. When she finally left Sophia's room, Amanda found Daniel waiting for her in the living room. "Everything okay?" he asked. Amanda sat down next to him on the sofa, leaning on his shoulder. "Yes. Sophia was telling me that sometimes public attention is too much. She's right. I was so focused on using our story to help other people that I didn't fully realize how it affected her." "We'll have to be more careful with boundaries." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "You're a great mother, Amanda. The fact that you're listening to Sophia and adjusting, that's exactly what a great mother does. Nobody gets everything right all the time. The important thing is to be willing to listen and change when necessary." In the following months, Amanda consciously stepped back from the public spotlight. She still ran Project Sophia, still worked at the hospital, but declined several interviews and public appearances, prioritizing time with Sophia and ensuring her daughter had space to simply be a teenager. This strategic retreat proved beneficial in unexpected ways. It gave Amanda time to reflect on everything she had built, to assess what was working and what needed adjustment. She realized that Project Sophia, while successful, was growing so rapidly that it was losing some of the personal touch that had made it special from the start. Amanda began restructuring, ensuring that even as they expanded, each chapter maintained the intimate community atmosphere that was so crucial to the program's success. She also used this time to return to school, enrolling in a master's program in public health. If she truly wanted to make systemic change, she needed to understand public health policy, advocacy at the legislative level, and organizational change strategies. These were skills that would complement her lived experience and clinical training. Sophia, for her part, was thriving. With less public pressure, she had joined the school's debate team, discovering a talent for articulate argumentation and critical thinking. She was also volunteering at a local children's hospital, confirming her interest in pursuing a career in healthcare. But unlike her mother, Sophia was thinking of becoming a doctor, specifically a pediatrician. "I want to be the kind of doctor that Dr. Mariana became," she told Amanda one night. "Someone who truly sees her patients, who treats each person with compassion regardless of their circumstances." Amanda felt a surge of pride. Her daughter was learning not only from Amanda's successes, but also from the lessons that had come from mistakes and redemption. On a particularly beautiful autumn afternoon, Amanda was in her office at the hospital when she received an unexpected visit. It was Maria, the pregnant teenager who had spoken to her at reception months before. But Maria now had a baby in her arms, a beautiful little boy who couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. "I wanted you to meet Miguel," Maria said with a radiant smile. "He was born 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to thank you personally. You saved my life, Amanda. Not literally like you saved that other woman, but in a way that is equally important. You gave me hope when I had none." Amanda invited Maria to sit down, and the two spent the next hour talking. Maria shared her story, how furious her parents had been when they found out about the pregnancy, how they had sent her away, how she had spent the last months of her pregnancy living with an aunt who barely tolerated her. But after connecting with Project Sophia, everything had changed. She had found a support network, resources, and most importantly, she had discovered that she wasn't alone. Now, she was living in a transitional housing program for young mothers, enrolled to finish high school online, and had a plan for her future. "I'm going to be a teacher," Maria said with determination. "I want to work with children who come from difficult situations to be the kind of adult who believes in them when no one else does." Amanda held little Miguel, feeling the familiar weight of a newborn in her arms, and was transported back to that night 10 years ago when she had held Sophia for the first time. "You're going to make it," she told Maria with absolute conviction. "Not because it will be easy, but because you are strong and because you are not alone. And one day, years from now, you will look back on this moment and realize that it was the beginning of something extraordinary, not the end." When Maria left with Miguel, Amanda stayed in her office for a long moment, absorbing the weight of that encounter. This was why it was all worthwhile. Not the awards or the recognition, not the media attention, or even the satisfaction of seeing policies change. It was this: a scared young mother finding hope, finding strength, finding a community that said, "We believe in you." That night, at home, Amanda had dinner with Sophia and Daniel, talking about their days, laughing at inside jokes, planning their end-of-year holidays. It was normal, ordinary, and absolutely perfect. After dinner, while Sophia was doing her homework and Daniel was washing the dishes, Amanda stood on the balcony for a moment, looking at the night sky. She thought of all the people who had been part of her journey. Her mother, who had learned to transform fear into support. Laura, whose life she had saved and to whom she had repaid 1,000 times over. Dr. Mariana, who had confronted her worst instincts and become an advocate. Beatriz, who had offered compassion when Amanda needed it most. Daniel, who loved her completely and unconditionally. And Sophia, her Sophia, who was her greatest pride and joy. 10 years ago, Amanda was a frightened teenager who thought her life was over. But that night in the hospital hadn't been an end. It had been a beginning. The beginning of a story about redemption, about compassion, about the incredible strength of the human spirit, about how a single moment of generosity can unleash waves of change that extend far beyond what anyone could imagine. Amanda had saved 2 lives that night, Laura and her baby. But in doing so, she had also saved herself. She had found purpose, community, and the unwavering certainty that she mattered, that her life had meaning, that she was capable of making a difference in the world. And now, every day, she helped other young mothers discover the same truth about themselves. This was her legacy, not perfection, but progress. Not a life without challenges, but a life where challenges were faced with courage and support. Not judgment, but compassion. Not shame, but pride. Not isolation, but community. Amanda smiled at the night sky, feeling deep gratitude for every step of the journey, even the painful ones, because they had all brought her to this moment. She was a mother, a nurse, an activist, a student, a partner, a daughter, a friend. She was complex and multifaceted, not defined by any single label, and she was, finally and completely, enough. The door opened behind her and Sophia came out, wrapping her arms around Amanda's waist from behind. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I love you too, my beautiful girl," Amanda replied, turning to hug her daughter. "More than words can say." And there, under the starry sky, mother and daughter remained embraced, two hearts beating in sync. A story that had begun with pain but had transformed into something beautiful, living proof that where there is compassion, there is always hope. Where there is community, there is always strength. And where there is love, there is always, always a way forward.